There are moments that truly highlight why so many still yearn for Barack Obama's unique style of leadership. What started as an ordinary speech that night rapidly turned into a memorable lesson for the Trumps. Barron Trump tried to ridicule Obama's remarks, but he quickly found himself quieted. What happened next became a striking example of how dignity can ultimately prevail over hubris. The day had finally come. Washington, D.C. hummed with excitement for one of its most prominent gatherings. A major leadership conference. Global leaders, veteran politicians, and powerful business people packed the venue. Yet, it was the front row that really drew everyone's focus. 3 names, not merely representing but seemingly splitting the political world, occupied those seats. Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Barron Trump. Each embodied a sharp difference. Obama calm and careful, representing diplomacy and reasoned discussion. Trump bold and straightforward, an emblem of combative strength, and Barron, youthful and assured, still developing his presence, but bearing a family name that echoed across every American news cycle. The auditorium was full, the atmosphere nearly electric with anticipation. Journalists murmured forecasts. Photographers carefully fine-tuned their equipment, and attendees couldn't resist glancing often toward the platform. Everyone there recognized it. With these 3 sharing one space, something important was bound to happen. The stage background shimmered in patriotic red, white, and blue banners hung gracefully throughout the space, and warm lights reflected off the gleaming floors. The moderator, a well-known political analyst, stepped to the podium. A tense smile crossed his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, "please welcome our opening speaker, former President of the United States, Barack Obama." The audience burst into cheers. Some stood up clapping, others applauded gently, but everyone leaned in eagerly. Then, from the side of the stage, Barack Obama emerged. He moved with a steady, poised elegance, tall and confident. He didn't have to speak yet. His mere appearance carried weight. The slight acknowledgement to the crowd. He started. "Thank you," he said, his tone warm and balanced. Like someone having a real discussion, not simply giving remarks. "It's encouraging to see so many people here this evening, leaders, thinkers, and young individuals prepared to influence what lies ahead." Next, he paused, scanning the room. A motion that seemed to pull everyone nearer. "I want to address something basic, something we all experience, even if we don't always voice it openly. The cost of living, the price of food, housing, fuel, it's impacting millions of households, decent, diligent Americans." The room became still. The only noise, the soft drone of the ventilation, Obama went on. "Nearly 62% of Americans are finding it hard to manage. Inflation isn't merely a statistic on a graph. It's the cause parents forego meals so their children can eat. It's the reason households brace themselves whenever a statement comes." The listeners paid close attention. Some nodded along. Others spoke quietly. Even those who disagreed with his views couldn't reject the reality in his message. Obama's voice strengthened. "But here's the point," he stated. "Leadership isn't about faulting the previous officeholder or the incoming one. Leadership is about stepping forward right now and declaring, 'What can we accomplish together to solve this?'" A surge of clapping spread across the hall. Obama gave a slight smile, took a brief drink of water, and continued. He discussed collaboration, of governmental responsibility, of empathy. He refrained from naming anyone specifically. Yet, the influence of present political strains clearly shaped his words. In the front row, Donald Trump stayed still, arms folded, his eyes locked on Obama. His jaw clenched, his face impassive. A quiet strain that conveyed much. Beside him, Barron sat upright and attentive, his phone placed screen down. He seemed composed yet interested, observing history taking place in real time. Obama ended his remarks with a line that earned silent admiration from the audience. "A great nation doesn't advance because one person succeeds. It advances when every person stands united even when it's difficult." He paused, glancing upward, then added, "Leadership isn't about assigning blame. It's about extending help." The crowd answered with extended, enthusiastic applause. Some stood once more. Even those from rival political sides joined in clapping. Obama moved back a little, nodding gratefully. Flashes flickered as photographers recorded the serene, thoughtful image of the former president, a portrait of steady assurance. But even as the room honored this instant, tension was quietly forming. In the front row, President Trump leaned toward his son. Though no one could catch his whispered comment, Barron responded with a brief, passing smirk. Trump's gaze stayed on Obama, his look growing firmer. He tapped a finger on the surface as though eagerly waiting his opportunity. Everyone understood he wasn't one to remain quiet following such remarks. The moderator, his tense smile returning, approached the microphone again. "Thank you, President Obama," he said. "That was compelling." The cheering gradually diminished, replaced by an uneasy quiet. Then, With a slight sharpness in his tone, the moderator declared, "Next, we'll hear from President Donald J. Trump." Obama went back to his place. Trump rose, fastened his jacket, and straightened his tie. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly, welcoming smile. It was a grin that announced, "Now it's my opportunity." The audience waited, cameras focused on him, reporters ready with their notes. Trump leaned into the microphone, the lights reflecting off the lectern. As he cleared his throat and started, his voice, crisp, assured, and distinctive, instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. The courteous clapping disappeared, replaced by an uneasy strain. Something much more direct was about to unfold. What had begun as a courteous occasion was on the verge of turning into an intense confrontation between two presidents and one son, who had no clue how dramatically things were about to intensify. The applause had just quieted. People still discussing Obama's message, his empathy, his composure, his subtle confidence. But at the front of the auditorium, one man stayed expressionless. President Donald Trump. He remained motionless, eyes fixed on Obama, his jaw clenched, his face unreadable. Yet you could almost sense the tension building inside him. He glanced right toward Barron and leaned in nearer. Though the cameras couldn't capture his quiet words, Barron gave a swift nod. Trump then adjusted his tie, straightened his jacket, and stood. The moderator's anxious voice carried through the microphone. "Now please welcome the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump." The applause this time was cautious, polite, almost guarded. Everyone recognized the unpredictable character of Trump. With a microphone in hand, he walked deliberately to the lectern, enjoying the focus. Flashes exploded like abrupt lightning throughout the hall, each stride resounding with an unmistakable sense of command. Trump paused for a moment, observing the crowd. Then he gave his characteristic half-smirk, half-challenged smile, and leaned toward the microphone. "Well," he started, his tone thick with irony. "That was quite a speech, wasn't it?" A few uneasy laughs spread through the audience. Others simply waited. They recognized that tone. Trump continued. "You know, Barack speaks a lot about unity, about togetherness, about how we should all share the load. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it?" He paused, his voice lowering slightly, becoming keener. "But here's the reality. The difficulties people encounter today didn't just emerge suddenly. They didn't begin last year or even the year before. They began when he held office." The room grew quiet. Trump wasn't softening his approach. He was plunging straight into conflict. He turned toward the audience, gesturing subtly for emphasis. "People can't purchase groceries. Fuel costs are skyrocketing. Families are struggling. And you know who laid that groundwork? Obama." Gasps spread through the listeners. Reporters hurried to jot notes. Cameras focused closely on Obama's face, which stayed calm, blank. Trump pushed forward, his voice resounding. "You speak about leadership, Barack, but leadership means accepting responsibility, and you never did. You speak about assisting people, but people are still suffering because of the chaos you left." Some in the audience clapped, others remained still, unsure if they were watching a speech or a verbal clash. Obama didn't stir, didn't interject. He simply sat back, hands clasped, his face almost disturbingly serene. Trump looked around, moving slightly behind the lectern. Inflation, unemployment, border disorder, all of it leads back to poor choices. You speak about hearing people. I've been hearing, and what they're saying is they're exhausted. He emphasized the final words, letting them linger. The moderator shifted uneasily. Murmurs started. But Trump wasn't done. "You know," he stated when I entered office, "I promised to repair what was damaged. And despite all the opposition, despite the endless criticism, we did things differently. Told the truth even when people disliked it." He turned his head slightly, looking at Obama. "We didn't stand here pretending everything was okay." The words carried heavy sarcasm. Obama's expression stayed the same, but you could sense the intensity of the moment. Every gaze in the room shifted between the two men, one composed, one intense. Trump leaned nearer to the microphone again. "Barack likes to appear thoughtful, but words are easy. While he speaks, people struggle. While he speaks, families lose homes. While he speaks, America bears the cost." The remark struck hard. A few in the audience clapped strongly, some booed quietly. The split in the room was clear, half supporting Trump's directness, half uneasy with his bluntness. But Trump flourished on that strain. He drew energy from it, smiled faintly. "You can deliver speeches all day. You can sound polished. You can choose the correct phrases, but if you don't produce outcomes, those phrases mean nothing. The crowd reacted again, louder this time. Trump appeared proud, assured. For a moment, it seemed like he had fully seized control of the room, but one person remained completely unaffected. Obama sat quietly, still calm and composed. He looked at Trump, nodded once, and gave a faint, knowing smile, the kind that seemed to say, "Proceed. I've encountered this before." That small smile entirely changed the atmosphere. The camera captured it, displaying it on the large screen. The audience noticed. Trump noticed as well. His smile vanished. For a short second, the dominance in the room visibly shifted. The clapping ceased. The murmurs restarted. Trump stepped back, glanced toward Barron, then back at the audience. Then, in one quick movement, he directed the microphone toward his son. "Barron," he said, "you've got something to say. Don't you?" Barron appeared startled, almost uncertain, but his father's steady stare indicated this was less a question and more an order. Barron leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and cleared his throat. The audience fell into total quiet. Even the photographers stopped snapping. A few seconds passed. Long, weighty seconds. Then Barron spoke. His tone was steady yet sharp, confident yet biting. In just 9 seconds he said something that would entirely alter the course of the entire gathering. What emerged from Barron Trump's mouth wasn't just surprising. It was the spark that would fuel the night's largest clash, leaving both Trump and his son completely silent. For a few painful seconds, the room stayed frozen in quiet. Every eye in that grand auditorium turned to one person, Barron Trump. He sat on the edge of his chair, tall and steady. But beneath that calm surface, the strain was evident. His father had just pushed him into the worldwide spotlight. And now everyone waited to see what the youngest Trump would do. He leaned forward slightly, adjusted the microphone, and took a slow, intentional breath. The entire auditorium was hushed, no murmurs. No phones, no motion. The silence was so dense you could sense it. Then with a faint, almost smug smile, Barron started. "Well," he said, his tone steady, but tinged with a touch of irony, "I guess we all value a good speech about unity and compassion, especially from someone who spent years dividing the country." A few gasps interrupted the quiet, followed by some nervous, sporadic claps. Obama didn't stir. He stayed seated, firm, his eyes fixed on Barron. Barron went on, his voice growing stronger. "My dad always says, leadership is about truth, and sometimes the truth isn't pleasant. Sometimes it's about raising questions that others are too scared to raise." Then came the statement that made the entire auditorium hold its breath, he said. "And while some people still wonder if every president was even born to lead this country," a shock wave swept through the audience. It was brief, barely 9 seconds, but the intent was clear. He was alluding to the old harsh claim about Obama's birth certificate. The very rumor that had caused such controversy years earlier. Now standing directly before Obama, Barron had revived it. Trump gave a slight smile, proud and pleased. But the rest of the room did not. Some attendees looked truly stunned. Others stared at their tables, trying to avoid being noticed reacting. The moderator froze, uncertain whether to step in. The mood had completely shifted. Obama remained perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Barron. There was no anger, no obvious surprise, just a deep silence, the kind that signals, "I'm choosing my moment." Barron looked around, clearly enjoying the focus for a brief instant. He had said something daring, something his father would certainly endorse. He leaned back slightly, folded his hands, and glanced toward his father for approval. Trump gave a firm nod like a leader satisfied with his subordinate. But across the room, the unease grew heavier with each passing second. Obama finally ended the silence. Not with words, but with a small, unreadable smile. It wasn't mocking, nor was it protective. It was that calm, knowing smile Obama had mastered over the years, the kind that made people wonder what thoughts rested behind it. A few rows back, someone whispered, "He's not going to accept that, is he?" But Obama didn't stir. Not yet. He took a slow breath, folded his arms, and waited. That wait, that pause was powerful. People leaned forward in their seats, eager to know what would happen next. Trump, mistaking Obama's composure for weakness, turned to the audience. "You see," he said, "that's what I mean. No response, no defense, just words." He laughed quietly. Barron smiled again, But that laughter wouldn't endure because behind that calm expression, Obama was prepared. Prepared to reverse this entire moment. After what felt like an endless silence, Obama slowly stood. He didn't hurry, nor did he scowl. He simply walked to the microphone, his movements intentional. The room fell completely silent again, even the sound crew halting their adjustments. Obama looked out over the audience, then directly at Barron. His voice was calm, low, and exact. "I've been in politics a long time," he began. "I've heard a lot of things, some intelligent, some not so intelligent. But I'll tell you this, mocking someone's background never strengthens your own background." He turned briefly toward Trump and repeating the same old lines doesn't make them any truer. Then he faced Barron again, his expression kind but resolute. "You see, son, what you just did, it's not confidence, it's imitation. You've adopted your father's style, but not his experience. And that's a risky combination." The air in the room tightened. Every word landed with the slow, resonant beat of a drum. "Oh," Obama continued, his voice steady, but now keener. "Now let me ask you something, Barron. You question where I come from, but do you even know where you come from? Are you Ivanka's kid or Melania's?" The line struck the room like lightning. Gasps echoed across the hall. Cameras snapped, heads turned. Barron froze, the color fading from his face. He looked frantically at his father, but Trump said nothing. Obama stood silent again, allowing the full impact of his words to settle. Barron's mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came. Trump's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching, the last traces of calm disappearing from his face, leaned over to Barron, muttering something sharp and low under his breath. Then, in a louder voice that carried across the stage, he commanded, "Go wait in the car." The audience gasped again. Barron hesitated, looking around awkwardly before slowly rising from his seat. Every step he took toward the exit echoed through the hushed hall. Obama didn't celebrate, didn't smirk. He simply stood there, composed, calm, almost paternal. When Barron finally disappeared behind the curtain, silence lingered like smoke. Trump's face turned red with anger. He raised a hand toward the microphone, clearly ready to reply, but Obama spoke first, his voice soft. "Turn insults into habits," he said. "They forget what respect looks like. And when respect disappears, so does leadership." The words were simple, but their meaning was devastating. Trump froze. The audience was completely silent. No one dared move. Obama stepped back from the microphone, letting his words echo in the stillness. Then, with one calm nod, he returned to his seat. That moment, 9 seconds of mockery, followed by a masterclass in composure, would become the defining event of the night. Obama hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't insulted anyone or shouted. He simply reminded everyone in that room and everyone watching later that real power doesn't need noise. It just needs control. The silence after Barron's exit felt endless. So profound you could almost hear the air stirring in the grand hall's space, now thick with tension, shock, and disbelief. President Trump remained seated, stiff as a statue, his jaw locked tight, his eyes fixed on Obama. For the first time that evening, the power dynamic in the room had undeniably shifted. Obama didn't move immediately. He sat with his hands folded, allowing the full weight of what had just transpired to settle over the audience. Then, in his trademark calm voice, he began to speak again. "You know," Obama said, turning slightly toward the audience, "when I was president, I faced criticism every single day. Some fair, some not. That's part of leadership. But I learned something important. You can't answer every insult. Sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could." The crowd listened intently. Trump, still visibly angry, leaned forward, clearly ready to interrupt, but Obama gently raised a hand, never breaking his composure. "But tonight," Obama continued, "I think there's something we all just witnessed that's worth talking about." He turned his gaze toward Trump's now empty right side where Barron had been seated moments before. "In the moment your son repeated a line meant to divide, meant to question someone's place in this country, I realized something. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's about what kind of lessons we pass down." The crowd grew quiet again, not daring to miss a single word. Obama looked at the audience, then back at Trump. "You see, when a child mocks, instead of asking questions, it's not his fault alone. It's a reflection of what he's been taught. And that's the danger of anger that's never checked. It spreads." Trump shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Obama took a slow breath and continued. "I've seen this pattern before. The personal attacks, the mockery, the distractions. It's always the same playbook. It started with you, Mr. President. It went through Ivanka, Melania, and now your son. A murmur rippled through the audience. People leaned forward, eyes wide. Obama's tone was calm, but every word landed like a heavy stone. Then, in one of the most unforgettable moments of the night, Obama looked directly at Trump and said, "Families are supposed to lift each other higher. But what happens when the family itself becomes the stage for attack?" Trump's expression changed. For the first time, he had no ready comeback. Obama paused, letting that question hang in the air. Then he turned to the audience again. "You know, Jasmine Crockett once said something powerful." Obama continued. "She said, 'Truth doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to look at it.'" That name, Jasmine Crockett, made the crowd shift again. Everyone knew who she was. A fierce congresswoman known for standing her ground and bringing evidence when others brought noise. Obama continued smoothly, his words cutting but perfectly controlled. She presented proof real. Proof about certain connections, certain behaviors within powerful families. Proof that made people uncomfortable. The room tensed. Trump's expression hardened. Obama's tone softened slightly. "I don't repeat rumors. I stick to facts. But the truth is, when powerful men treat women, their own daughters, as objects of flattery or comparison, something's deeply wrong," gasps echoed. Everyone knew what he was referring to. Obama looked out into the crowd, his voice steady and almost sorrowful. "In 2006 you said, and I quote, 'If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.' That's not leadership. That's not pride. That's a man confusing love with vanity." Trump's eyes widened, furious, but speechless. Obama took a step back, giving the audience a moment to process his words. The room was utterly still, but it was electric, the kind of silence that feels louder than any noise. "Leadership," Obama said finally, "isn't about mocking. It's about mentoring. It's not about tearing down someone else's name. It's about building your own with dignity." He turned again, facing the crowd. His voice grew softer, warmer, the way only Obama could deliver a message that both cut and healed. "When we raise our children, whether they live in the White House or in a one-bedroom apartment, we teach them by example. If all they see is bitterness, that's what they'll become. If all they hear is anger, that's the language they'll speak." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the hall. "But if they see respect, even toward those who disagree with you, then they learn what true strength looks like." By now, even those who arrived as Trump supporters were silent. They weren't watching a debate anymore. They were watching a lesson unfold. Obama finished his water, set the glass down, and offered a faint smile. "Tonight I'm not here to win an argument," he said. "I'm here to remind everyone, including the next generation, that leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about being real." He looked straight at Trump one last time. Because when power turns into pride, and pride turns into cruelty, that's when a nation starts to lose its heart. The crowd broke into quiet applause at first, hesitant, almost afraid of what might happen next. Then it grew louder, rising into a thunderous ovation. Trump sat there stone-faced, his hands tightened on the armrests, his face red with frustration. But he couldn't speak. Not yet, because deep down even he knew that the moment he uttered a word, he would lose the room completely. Obama offered a small nod of thanks, stepped back from the podium, and walked calmly toward the exit. No mic drops, no shouting, just quiet strength. As he left the stage, cameras followed him, lights catching his steady, composed, dignified profile. Behind him, Trump remained seated, motionless. The image spoke volumes. One man had shouted, the other had taught, and only one had left with his dignity intact. As Barack Obama walked off that stage, the atmosphere felt almost surreal. People weren't cheering wildly or shouting. It was simply quiet. Not the silence of confusion, but the kind that comes when everyone knows they've just witnessed something rare, a moment of undeniable truth. Obama didn't look back. His steps were calm, his expression unshaken. Each stride toward the exit seemed to resonate louder than applause. The cameras followed him, capturing his steady, composed, and dignified face. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. His silence spoke more than 1,000 sound bites ever could. Meanwhile, President Trump remained seated at the front, still frozen in disbelief. His son Barron hadn't returned. His supporters looked uneasy, whispering to one another but not daring to speak too loudly. And for the first time in a long while, Trump wasn't commanding the moment. Obama was. Even as he exited the room, he was still leading its energy. And it was power without volume, control without force, respect without demand. That's what made the moment so profoundly impactful. Outside the hall, the cool night air welcomed Obama as he stepped through the double doors. Reporters waited, dozens of them, microphones extended, hoping for some comment. But Obama simply smiled, raised a hand. courteously, and said, "Good evening, everyone. Let's all take a breath." Then he entered his car and departed. No additional remarks, no triumph, just genuine poise. Back inside, the gathering stayed in stunned quiet. The host, uncertain what to say next, finally rose and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for President Obama." And once again, the entire hall stood to their feet, not from allegiance, but from deep admiration. Even those who opposed him found themselves joining the applause. Trump glanced around, realizing the mood of the room had fully shifted. He leaned toward the host, whispered something, then rose and left the stage without another word. Later that night, clips of the event circulated rapidly. But what truly lingered in people's thoughts wasn't the dispute or the tension. It was the way Obama concluded it with elegance, serenity, without turning to a single slight. And that's what made it memorable. In the days that followed, journalists, political observers, and everyday people all pondered that evening. Some commended Obama's restraint, others questioned Trump's response. But the one conclusion everyone shared was how much that instant revealed about character. Because in that hall, beneath those bright lights, people didn't just witness a confrontation between two presidents. They saw a father, a son, and a man who reminded them that leadership surpasses titles or authority. It's about self-discipline. Obama later spoke briefly at a modest community gathering. When someone asked him about what happened that night, he smiled and said, "Sometimes the loudest lesson comes from the quietest response." That line echoed for days. It struck a deep chord. See, Obama's message wasn't just directed at the Trumps, it was for everyone observing, for the parents raising children in a world full of clamor, for the young individuals seeking their voice amid a chorus of yelling, for the leaders both present and emerging who mistake dominance for empathy. He wanted people to recognize that true strength isn't about overpowering. It's about comprehension. It's about knowing when to hold firm and when to withdraw with dignity. That's why when he redirected that question to Barron, "Are you Ivanka's kid or Melania's?" it wasn't malice. It was a reflection. A mirror of what occurs when copying supplants authenticity. Obama didn't need to embarrass anyone to claim the moment. He simply revealed the truth steadily, intentionally, and with total mastery. As for Barron, he reportedly remained silent for days following the event. No public statements, no appearances. And perhaps that quiet wasn't surrender. Perhaps it was contemplation, because every young person errs. The question is, do they grow from it? That was the deeper insight Obama intended everyone to carry away that night. When the world challenges your patience, when someone ridicules you or doubts you, don't allow anger to guide you. Pause, breathe, respond with dignity. Because the instant you permit someone else to steer your emotions, you surrender your strength. That's what made Obama's serenity so powerful that night. While others yelled, he listened. While others assaulted, he instructed. And in doing so, he reminded everyone observing that true leadership doesn't demand attention through volume. It earns quiet through respect. As the lights faded in that Washington hall, and the evening concluded, the image that stayed etched in people's minds wasn't the clash, it was the clear contrast. Trump's fury versus Obama's calm, Barron's taunt versus Obama's poise. And that quiet departure from the stage. A man who didn't merely prevail in a debate, but captured the entire audience. And that leads us to the core of the story. No matter who you are, where you originate, or what name you bear, respect remains timeless. Dignity never loses relevance. And the calmest person in the room is typically the one holding command. Obama's closing action that night wasn't about retribution. It was about reminding everyone present that true leadership doesn't require volume. It simply requires standing firm, remaining compassionate, and departing with grace.